Translator. Nine Tails. A voice laden with surging true chi rolled across the wilderness. Though it came from afar, it struck as if spoken right at their ears, making Chinmu's ears hum and tremble. He looked toward the source and saw several figures standing upon a mountain cliff some 2 miles away. Chinmu could not make out their faces. Yet he knew at once they were no ordinary folk. Only one with profound cultivation could cast his voice across such a distance. Devil? Who's a devil? I'm merely an ordinary person by the river, and this little elk is just a calf I'm raising. Granny C slung her basket over her arm and smiled. Then she whispered, "Moor, run!" The urgency in Granny C's voice startled Chinmu. He tried to speak, yet no words came. He did not wish to leave, fearing Granny might be in danger. "You're just an ordinary person by the river?" Projecting your voice to us so clearly and with such strong chi, no ordinary old woman could do that. An old yet vigorous voice rang from the cliff, then let out a cold laugh. "There's no way that we, the Lee River's Five Elders, could be mistaken about the heavenly devil creation technique, a skill that's constantly changing, stripping the skin to make clothing. You still want to explain when we've clearly seen such a sinister skill?" "You must have frequently transformed humans into livestock using the heavenly devil creation technique, then drag them to the market for slaughter, huh?" Another elder upon the cliff shouted with solemn force. "Many of the seniors of our righteous sect have even been transformed into livestock and forced to graze on grass for eternity. Having seen your methods, there's no way you could trick us. An elk is also a living being. For you to use its skin and soul to create such an evil thing," another elder said, his voice heavy with grief. "God knows how many more innocent lives will be lost if we don't kill you here and now. Who else should we kill if not you?" Granny C turned about to Chinmu and plucked the needle from between his brows, speaking softly. "These old blokes aren't a threat. However, if you stay by Granny's side, Granny will be distracted trying to protect you, so run quickly. Run back to the village." Chinmu hesitated no longer. He spun and fled, following the river path at their side. He had thought it would be awkward to move after becoming an elk, yet once he began to run, he realized he had been wrong. Rather than clumsy, he felt as though he had always been an elk, and he ran faster than he ever had before. "The little devil is trying to escape? Won't it be disastrous if we let you escape? Lee River's 5 disciples, it's time for your training. Your target is that elk below us. Eliminate him and bring me his head." At the same time, voices of both girls and boys rang out, crisp as struck jade. "Understood." In a flash, 5 figures leapt from the cliff and raced down its face. Swift as galloping steeds, they reached the cliff's foot in the blink of an eye. There lay a deep pool where a furious waterfall crashed down the mountain. Yet the 5 did not splash into the water. Instead, they lightly stepped upon the surface and began to run after Chinmu. Granny C's heart sank. Spirit bodies, and the levels of their spirit embryo divine treasures, definitely aren't weak. Moor's speed can't contend with theirs. They'll definitely catch up to him. Just as Granny Sai was about to move to stop them, 4 figures came flying through the air and landed around her. Only one remained atop the mountain cliff, standing proudly, clearly with no intention of coming down. What are Lee River's 5 elders doing here in the Great Ruins? Granny Sai rolled her eyes and snickered, as 4 elders hemmed her in. "Considering how dangerous the Great Ruins are, aren't you scared that your famous selves might die here?" Among the 4, the elder with the black beard replied coldly, "We heard that some filthy disgraces were hiding in the Great Ruins, demons and devils that couldn't live outside and came here for refuge. Therefore we, the 5 elders, brought our disciples here to subdue them." "It still ain't confirmed who's the devil or the demon, or who'll be subduing who." Granny C tucked her basket into the crook of one arm and brandished her pair of scissors in the other. Looking as if her eyes were dim, she chuckled. "I haven't exercised these old bones for quite some time. Lucky for me, my abilities haven't completely wilted. Could it be that you geezers want me to turn you into clothing? How dare you be so arrogant, you demon? Are you even qualified to be arrogant in front of us?" 4 of Lee River's 5 elders shouted. They sprang into motion, their strikes staggered yet linked as they assaulted Granny C. At that very moment, Chinmu, desperately sprinting toward disabled elderly village, saw lightning flash. Pure white bolts tore through the air, washing the foothills and the whole mountain in light several times brighter than the sun. Following those flashes, thunder rumbled behind him like the collapse of heaven. Chinmu glanced back for an instant, yet saw only waves of wind exploding outward from where Granny C stood. The sudden gale lifted earth, stones, even boulders weighing thousands of pounds, hurling them outward at terrifying speed. "Granny will be fine," Chinmu said, though his heart sank, and he pressed on. Suddenly, wet footfalls sounded from the river beside him. He turned his head and saw a young boy and girl dashing across the water. Both sprinted upon the river's surface without sinking. Their feet struck the water in a blur, rising and falling so swiftly that their pace far exceeded Chinmu's gallop. Before the river could even splash against their soles, they were already gone, vanishing like the wind. These two have already reached the level of riding the waves that Grandpa Cripple said I'm currently unable to reach. They're much stronger than me. Soon the two overtook Chinmu, running along the river's center. After passing him, they angled toward the bank as they ran, clearly intending to cut him off from the front. Chinmu glanced behind and saw another person on his tail. To his left, two more were threading between mountain ridges, their figures leaping from the dense forest time and again to skim across the treetops. Yet they could not sustain it long, and had dropped back to the ground to catch their breath. Even so, they too quickly surpassed Chinmu and surged ahead. "I can't let them cut me off. I need to get ahead of them and reach the village. I need to get Grandpa Ma and the rest to save Granny." Grinding his teeth, Chinmu veered away from the riverbank and plunged into the forest. Had he continued along the river's edge, he would certainly have been caught. The two at midstream were far too fast. The pair moving through the woods were slightly slower. Thus the forest was his only choice. "Little devil, you and that elk-murdering she-devil can forget about escaping." As Chinmu dashed into the trees, one of the two youths there accelerated and slipped past the other. Yet he was still a fraction too late, allowing Chinmu in elk form to gallop beyond him. "Don't worry, he won't escape." The leading pair, the boy and girl who had run atop the river, wore indifferent expressions. The girl flipped her sleeves and laughed softly, suddenly increasing her speed and bounding through the treetops as though she were flying. The boy, meanwhile, calmly ordered the other three to pursue Chinmu and circle around to outflank him. No matter how Chinmu frantically ran, he could not shake the five behind him. Worse still, he was forced farther and farther from disabled elderly village, driving deep into the great ruins. He had lived in disabled elderly village for 14 to 15 years, and the farthest he had ever ventured was only 3 or 4 miles. Now he had gone well beyond that, and the surroundings grew unfamiliar. At the same time, the land became increasingly desolate, with no path to be seen. As Chinmu continued, a valley appeared ahead. Among peach blossom trees filling the valley, he saw a herd of elks. He hurried over and merged into them. Whoosh! A sweet fragrance swept across as the girl landed, her sleeves fluttering. Staring at the elk herd before her, she frowned. "Where's the devil brat, senior sister?" One youth around Chinmu's age asked as they landed one after another. The girl pursed her lips and said, "He has blended into this elk herd." "Then let's slaughter all of these elks." The youths charged into the herd, brandishing swords and knives, slaughtering without mercy. Though the elks were swift, they were still slower than these youths. All 5 possessed spirit bodies and were no weaklings, true martial practitioners. The elks scattered in all directions, yet none could flee the carnage. In no time, elks fell one after another. Suddenly, a human voice rang out from within the chaotic herd. "Didn't you say that elks were also living beings?" he asked. "Granny killed a single elk, but all of you are slaughtering an entire herd. Why do you claim that we're the ones following the path of the devil?" "Over there." The girl's eyes glittered as she gathered her chi and brandished her longsword. White tiger chi spread from her into the blade, and it blazed with brilliant gold. The sword left her hand and shot toward Chinmu, who was galloping alongside the herd. Chinmu twisted, changing direction to evade, yet the sword mirrored his turn and continued to chase him. What kind of technique is this? Bewilderment filled Chinmu's mind. Could it be a divine art? doesn't look like it. Grandpa Butcher said that a divine art can only be achieved when one's martial path has been cultivated to the extreme. This girl's martial path is significantly inferior to Grandpa Butcher's. As the sword struck in to kill, Qin hugged the ground and shifted again, barely slipping past the blade. In that instant, he caught sight of a fine thread tied to the sword's handle. One end bound the sword, the other held in the girl's hand. The thread was as fine as silk, making it especially difficult to notice. Translators. Editor, Ninetales. Could it be she's using that gossamer fine filament to rein in the blade? But with a strand so thin, how can she make the sword twist its course? Before he could dwell further on the marvel of that thread, Qin shot off at once in a sprint. A heartbeat later, the flying sword whistled past him and plunged deep into the trunk of a towering tree with a muffled thud. As though the sword had life of its own, it shuddered within the wood, yet could not wrench itself free. Soon the young girl drifted over, seized the treasure sword's hilt, and tugged it out in vexation. My white tiger vital key is still not strong enough to command my sword as though it were an extension of my flesh. Junior Sister Qing, it's already astonishing that you can shape your vital chi into a thread and use it to steer your sword in battle. The youth who had skimmed across the river's waves with her arrived at her side and offered a gentle smile. What you lack is experience, not cultivation. That is why our masters have brought us into the great ruins, to temper and mend our shortcomings. In the past, all we did was cultivate, so we lack true combat experience. This little devil is our chance to test ourselves in real combat. You'll soon be able to control your sword perfectly with your chi. The other three youths caught up to the pair, and one of them smiled as he spoke. The little devil turned into an elk. Elk are nimble. No wonder he could dodge Senior Sister's flying sword. Senior Sister Qing recovered her spirit and again directed her sword to stab at Qin. With a lovely laugh, she said, "Senior Brother Q, don't strike for now. Leave this little devil to me. I'll use him to train my sword control." Senior Brother Q was the youth who had run across the river with her. He nodded at her words and said, "Come, junior brothers. Let us admire Junior Sister Qing's sword skills." Questions churned in Qin heart as he struggled while dodging the sword that chased him from behind. Controlling a sword with chi, could it be the thread in that girl's hand is her vital chi, and not an actual length of thread? Vital chi can control a treasure sword to that extent? Will I be able to do that? When he learned the pig slaughtering knife, Butcher only taught Qin to use both hands to command the blade. Butcher never taught him to use chi to control it, so he knew nothing of such matters. Seeing that female practitioner command her sword with her chi, a notion formed in Qin mind. If chi could be used to control a sword, could his vital chi be used to control other things? However, he had no time to ponder. That Senior Sister Qing continued to drive her sword onward, letting it pursue Qin without pause. Moreover, since Granny Sai had turned him into an elk, his limbs felt awkward and ill-suited. Even the vital chi in his body had grown dormant, no longer responding as it usually did. Chi! Sword light flashed from behind, grazing Qin back. A chill ran down his spine, soon followed by a burning pain. He could tell Senior Sister Qing had managed to wound his back. This is bad. An elk may be swift, but it's still slower than someone with a true spirit body. If I'm injured again, I fear it'll be hard for me to escape as an elk. No sooner had that thought ended than he felt his mouth suddenly begin to split apart. Yet, it was not truly his mouth splitting, but the elk skin peeling away from his body, starting at the mouth. Qin instantly recalled the moment Granny C had urged him to run. Back then, she had secretly removed a needle protruding from the space between his brows, the very needle that had pierced his heaven soul. Soon enough, his head had separated from the elk skin. The sword sliced the air, slashing toward Qin in an attempt to take his life. Qin lunged forward with all the strength he could muster, tore himself free of the elkskin, and tumbled several yards ahead before scrambling up and running. Behind him, the sword controlled by Senior Sister Qing shredded the elkskin into pieces. Its movements were light as a falling petal and swift as lightning. Chasing Qin and trying to kill him had, it seemed, sharpened her sword skill tremendously. Breaking free from the elk skin delayed Chinmu's escape for an instant, and in that instant one of the youths traversed the treetops and landed before him, cutting off his route. The two were only about 10 yards apart. At such a distance, they would collide in the very next moment. Chinmu had no time to change direction, so without thinking, he subconsciously used the leg technique Cripple had taught him. Seeming to stumble forward, Chinmu surged ahead by clawing at the ground with his hands in place of his feet. His legs, now lifted into the air, twisted with the rest of his body, accelerating until they resembled a whirlwind. Like a spinning top, he shot toward the youth before him. The youth, a few years older than Chinmu, looked on with a derisive smile. He raised both arms to block, and a murky green radiance spread over them as dragon scales began to surface on his skin. "Green dragon's arms!" the youth cried. In the next instant, Chinmu's legs smashed into the youth's arms. 2 crisp metallic clanks rang out, and before the smile could be wiped from the youth's face, he grunted and lost his balance. Chinmu's onslaught forced him backward. The youth's sleeves were torn to shreds, the remnants fluttering about like paper butterflies. Dragon claw tattoos were visible on the skin of both arms, the claws coiling in a lifelike manner, and it was clear the scales had come from those claws. However, both arms had turned red and swollen after taking Chinmu's legs head-on. "You hid iron weights on your legs?" the youth exclaimed, furious and astonished. Both arms trembled with pain. His gaze dropped to Chinmu's feet. "Even your shoes are made of iron?" Chinmu regained his footing and fled in haste. Yet the youth's words reminded him that 2 iron weights were still strapped to his legs. Since Chinmu was training leg techniques, Cripple had demanded he wear iron weights at all times, and made him swear never to remove them. As Cripple watched his progress and saw Chinmu's body grow sturdier and his strength increase, the one-legged man ensured that the iron weights strapped to Chinmu's calves became heavier and heavier. On top of that, Cripple had Mute the blacksmith forge a pair of iron boots for Chinmu, further increasing the burden. That pair of thick-soled iron boots weighed 5 kilograms in total, and each iron weight weighed 10 kilograms. A total of 25 kilograms was fastened to Chinmu's legs. Cripple had ordered Chinmu to train until he could no longer feel the weight of the irons and boots. Only then would he be allowed to take them off. Chinmu had only recently grown accustomed to them, so in his frantic escape he hadn't even remembered he was wearing them. But if he tried to remove them now, he would surely be caught. There was no way he could afford to stop moving. Trample on Mount Meru. As Chinmu ran, he suddenly gathered strength into his right leg and used the skill. Trample on Mount Meru. The thick sole of his iron boot splattered like mud, shattering the entire boot into flying debris. At the same time, his calf muscles flexed and expanded, bursting the iron weight apart and blasting its remnants into the trees, as though they were sharp arrows. Chinmu stepped forward with his other leg, and as his foot landed, the other iron boot and weight shattered as well. Whoosh! Leaping suddenly into the air, Chinmu felt incomparably light. He easily reached a branch near the top of a tree, and the ease of it frightened him greatly. High in the tree, barefoot, Chinmu's weight caused the branch to dip slightly. Sword lights flashed below and shot upward. Looking down, Chinmu saw the tips of a dozen swords. Senior Sister Qing's sword handling was growing stronger with every passing breath. She was not controlling a dozen swords. She had created the illusion of a dozen blades with a single sword. Chinmu suddenly recalled Cripple's words. Don't think about whether a foothold can bear your weight. As long as you're fast enough, even water will be solid ground. Grass, air. Everything will become solid ground. Pushing off with the tips of his toes, Chinmu sprang forward. The sword lights burst into the sky, shredding the crown of the great tree he had perched upon. 2 youths leaped up and landed among the treetops, just in time to see Chinmu striding across the tips of the trees, dashing away like a flowing wind. They could only stare blankly, astonished by Chinmu's speed. "Why is he so fast?" one of them asked. "That kid is younger than us, but his cultivation seems to be slightly stronger than ours." As the 2 youths were thinking, they saw Senior Brother Q vanish like smoke and begin chasing Chinmu at an even faster pace. As expected of Senior Brother Q, he's far more powerful than we are. He's reached the pinnacle of the spirit embryo. Both of them sighed in admiration. With Senior Brother Q personally pursuing him, there's no way that little devil can escape. At this exact moment, a dark shadow suddenly took form within the forest. A hairy palm the size of a woven mat came hurtling toward Senior Brother Q, slapping him as he dashed through the air. Senior Brother Q flew backward, spinning out of control and crashing to the ground. He tumbled a short distance before stopping, coughing up a mouthful of blood as he struggled to sit up. "Don't go over there! There's a devil ape! That's devil ape territory!" The other four youths immediately halted in their tracks. As the shadow stepped out from the trees, they saw a massive, terrifying black gorilla. Its eyes were deep red, and fangs jutted from its mouth. Beating its chest like a drum, it bellowed, "Die, young'un!" Chin-Mu, who had run ahead earlier, had also been slapped from the air by this devil ape. He was now lying at the devil ape's feet, unmoving. The youths could not tell whether he was dead. Staring at Chin-Mu intently, Senior Sister Ching muttered, "One palm strike from that devil ape heavily injured Senior Brother Q, and that little devil took the same hit too. He should be dead, right?" Before she could finish, she jumped in fright. Chin-Mu, lying on the ground before the devil ape, had tilted his head slightly, as if to ascertain the situation. "That kid isn't dead yet?" she said in disbelief. The pitch-black devil ape roared a few times, then stopped when it saw the rest of the youths did not dare step forward. It lowered its gaze to Chin-Mu and used 2 fingers to flip his body over. "Young'un, die?" Seeing Chin-Mu's eyes stretched wide, blood streaming over his whole face, even his tongue lolling out, it was plain he could not be any more dead. Snorting in satisfaction, the devil ape tossed Chin-Mu's body aside. Then it sat down and began plucking leaves from a nearby tree, eating them. Even though it's so fierce, the devil ape is actually a herbivore. Chin-Mu kept his eyes wide open as blood continued to run down his face, and he slowly crawled away using his elbows. All of a sudden, the devil ape turned its head to look at Chin-Mu's body, which had gone limp again. It continued to glare at the body, unmoving. Stretching out a finger to poke what it believed was a corpse, the ape discovered Chin-Mu's body had already become icy and hard. "Young'un, die," it said again with renewed satisfaction, then turned back and focused on eating tree leaves without a care. Watching from afar, Senior Sister Ching could no longer help herself. "Hey, big fella, don't you find it weird that the young'un corpse became so cold and hard so quickly?" As if understanding her, the devil ape slapped its forehead and immediately turned around. The young'un corpse, however, had already risen and begun to flee in frantic haste.